A glass bowl shattered across the Montana ranch kitchen. Jenna Daxton's mouth opened in a silent scream, clutching behind her ear as boiling water exploded across the floor. Her billionaire father had spent 10 years and millions dragging her to specialists in 4 states. Every single doctor said the same thing: congenital deafness, nothing we can do. But when the maid whispered her name, Jenna turned toward the sound. The impossible happened. The deaf child responded to a voice. Then the maid examined her ear and found something moving beneath the skin. Something metallic. Something that shouldn't be there. Jenna wasn't born deaf. Someone deliberately made her that way. And the person who paid for it? Her own father. Before we uncover who did this and why, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if you want to see how far this conspiracy goes, you need to subscribe right now, because what happens next will shatter everything you think you know. The glass bowl hit the floor first. Then the scream, silent, desperate, raw, ripped through the Daxton Ranch kitchen in Gallatin County, Montana. Jenna Daxton stumbled backward, both hands clawing at the skin behind her right ear, her mouth stretched wide in agony no one could hear. Kayla Amelia moved on instinct. She lunged across the marble counter, grabbing the 10-year-old girl by the shoulders just as the pot of boiling water tipped off the stovetop. Steam erupted. Scalding liquid splashed across the tiles where Jenna had been standing half a second earlier. Grayson Daxton burst through the side door, still in his charcoal suit from a land acquisition meeting in Bozeman. His eyes swept the wreckage, shattered glass, pooling water, his daughter trembling in the arms of the maid he'd hired 3 months ago. What the hell happened? His voice cracked with something sharper than anger. Fear, maybe. Or humiliation, he couldn't name. But Kayla wasn't looking at him. She was staring at Jenna's hand. The girl pressed harder behind her ear, fingers digging into the same spot she'd touched for years. Dozens of specialists across Seattle, Denver, Salt Lake City, even a pediatric neuroscience team in Houston, all of them said the same thing. Asterisk, congenital deafness. Nothing we can do. Asterisk. Except this time, Kayla saw something different. A flicker beneath the skin. A movement. As if something inside Jenna's ear had asterisk, shifted, asterisk. Kayla knelt slowly, her pulse hammering. She whispered, barely audible, "Sweetheart, does it hurt?" Jenna's eyes lifted. And then impossible, medically impossible, the girl nodded. Grayson staggered backward. "No, that's not, she can't." Kayla's voice stayed steady, though her hands shook. "Jenna, squeeze my hand if you hear me." The squeeze came instantly, hard, desperate. Grayson's face drained white. His daughter, the child every doctor in 4 states declared profoundly, irreversibly deaf, had just responded to sound. And in that kitchen, surrounded by broken glass and boiling water, the first crack in a decade-long lie split wide open. Why did a girl supposedly born deaf suddenly react to a voice? To understand what happened in that kitchen, you need to know how far Grayson Daxton had already fallen. And I mean fallen, not financially, but emotionally. The man was a billionaire who'd spent 10 years throwing money at a problem that only got worse. It started the day Jenna was born at Helena Medical Center. Her mother, Vanessa, hemorrhaged during delivery. The doctors tried everything. She died anyway. Grayson held his newborn daughter for the first time, in the same room where his wife's body was still warm. From that moment, Jenna became the only thing keeping him alive. But 3 months later, a pediatrician in Helena told him something that shattered what was left of his world. "Your daughter has congenital deafness. Profound. Irreversible. There's nothing we can do." Grayson refused to accept it. He flew Jenna to Seattle Children's Hospital, then Denver, then Salt Lake City. He spent weeks in Houston at a pediatric neuroscience center that specialized in impossible cases. Every specialist ran the same tests, Every report came back identical. Congenital auditory nerve damage. No surgical option. No cure. He burned through millions. Private jets. Experimental consultations. Cutting-edge imaging in Boston. A team in San Francisco that claimed they could reverse anything. They couldn't reverse this. And with every failed diagnosis, Grayson grew colder, more isolated, more convinced the world had abandoned his daughter the same way it took his wife. By the time Jenna turned 8, she'd stopped trying to connect with people. She played alone in the ranch fields. She never smiled, and every few minutes she'd press her fingers behind her right ear, hard like she was trying to dig something out. Grayson asked doctors about it. They dismissed it as a nervous habit. Children with sensory loss develop coping mechanisms, one neurologist in Portland told him. It's normal, but it wasn't normal. And the truth? If you're not subscribed yet, you're about to miss the moment everything Grayson believed gets destroyed. Because what Kayla found in that kitchen wasn't a miracle. It was evidence of a crime that started the day Jenna was born. Kayla Amelia wasn't supposed to get close to Jenna. That was made clear the day she was hired. Grayson brought her to the Daxton Ranch in Gallatin County with one instruction: keep the house running. Don't interfere with my daughter. The head housekeeper, a sharp-eyed woman named Bridget Townsend, reinforced it even harder. The girl doesn't need another person trying to fix her. She needs routine, distance. Don't complicate things. But Kayla couldn't help it. The first time she saw Jenna, the girl was sitting alone in the east pasture, surrounded by wildflowers she couldn't hear rustling in the wind. She was drawing something in the dirt with a stick over and over. The same shape. A spiral. Kayla walked closer. Jenna didn't notice until Kayla's shadow crossed her line of sight. The girl flinched, dropping the stick, her hand flying instinctively to that spot behind her ear. Kayla knelt slowly, careful not to startle her. She picked up the stick and drew her own spiral next to Jenna's. Then she smiled. Jenna stared at her for a long moment, and then, unexpectedly, she smiled back. From that day forward, something shifted. Jenna started following Kayla around the ranch. She'd sit in the kitchen while Kayla prepped meals. She'd wait by the barn when Kayla fed the horses. She never spoke, of course, but her presence said everything. The other staff noticed immediately. Bridget's jaw tightened every time she saw them together. "You're getting too attached," she warned Kayla one morning. "Mr. Daxton won't like it." She was right. Grayson confronted Kayla 2 weeks later in the hallway outside Jenna's room. His voice was low, controlled, but edged with something darker. "My daughter doesn't need a friend. She needs professionals, people who understand her condition." Kayla met his eyes. "With respect, sir, has anyone asked what she needs?" Grayson's face went rigid. He didn't answer. He just walked away. But the damage was done. The forbidden bond had formed. And it terrified everyone in that house because Jenna had started doing something she'd never done before. She'd started choosing Kayla over her own father. Why does a child who can't hear gravitate toward one specific person? Kayla couldn't sleep that night. Something about the kitchen incident wouldn't let her rest. The way Jenna responded to her voice, the way the girl's hand pressed so desperately behind her ear, the way something beneath the skin seemed to move. She lay in the guest house at the Daxton Lakeside cabin in Flathead County, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail. And then another memory surfaced, one she'd been trying to bury for 5 years. Her grandmother, Lorraine, had died after what was supposed to be a routine auditory procedure. The surgery was at Helena Medical Center. The surgeon promised it would restore her hearing. Instead, Lorraine developed severe neurological complications. She died 3 weeks later, her body rejecting something the doctors couldn't explain. The autopsy revealed a foreign object lodged deep in her auditory canal. The family tried to sue. The case was dismissed. The hospital called it an unfortunate anomaly. The surgeon, Dr. R. Halden, was quietly removed from practice for ethical violations, but no criminal charges were ever filed. Kayla had spent years trying to forget that name, but now, lying in the dark, she couldn't shake the connection. Jenna's symptoms looked disturbingly similar. The way she pressed behind her ear, the faint discoloration Kayla had noticed when she examined the girl more closely earlier that evening. And then there was the smell, a faint chemical odor on Jenna's pillowcase that didn't belong. At 2 a.m., Kayla got out of bed. She crossed the yard to the main cabin, where Grayson kept old medical files in a locked office. She knew the code. She'd seen Bridget enter it once when retrieving tax documents. The office was cold, dark, quiet. Kayla pulled open the file drawer labeled Pediatrics General. She flipped through folders, heart pounding, until she found one mislabeled under a generic tab. The name on the file stopped her cold. Jenna Daxton, newborn, auditory assessment, Helena Medical Center. Her hands trembled as she opened it, and when she saw the signature at the bottom of the first page, her blood turned to ice. Dr. R. Halden, the same surgeon who killed her grandmother, had examined Jenna as a newborn. What did that doctor do to this child? Kayla's hands shook as she spread the pages across the desk. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She'd expected to find routine newborn assessments, standard hearing tests, maybe some notes about Jenna's diagnosis. What she found instead made her stomach collapse. The first page was a standard auditory screening form dated 10 years ago, 3 days after Jenna was born. But the results didn't match what Grayson had been told, not even close. Auditory response, normal, bilaterally. Reflexive startle response, present. Cochlear function, within expected range. Kayla read it twice, then 3 times. Jenna wasn't born deaf. Her hearing was normal. She flipped to the next page, a handwritten note clipped to the file. The signature at the bottom, Dr. R. Halden. Patient selected for Phase 2 trial. Parental consent obtained under standard surgical disclosure. Device implantation successful. Post-op auditory suppression confirmed. Monitoring protocol initiated. Kayla's vision blurred, her throat closed. They didn't diagnose Jenna as deaf. They made her deaf. She kept reading, her breath coming faster. The next document was a funding approval form from the Helena Medical Center Board. It referenced a malpractice settlement that had nearly bankrupted the hospital 2 years before Jenna was born. The board needed to justify millions in experimental auditory research grants to stay operational. They needed test subjects, infants, specifically. And at the bottom of the funding document, one name appeared over and over as the primary financial backer, Grayson Daxton. He owned a controlling share in the Helena facility. He'd signed off on the research budget. He'd unknowingly funded the very program that destroyed his daughter's hearing. Kayla's chest tightened. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But she forced herself to keep reading because the file wasn't finished. If you're not subscribing, you're about to miss the moment this story becomes something else entirely. The final page was a post-surgical report dated 6 months after Jenna's procedure. It detailed complications, infections, neurological damage in 3 other infant patients. One of those patients was listed by name, Lorraine Amelia, Kayla's grandmother. The room spun, her knees buckled. She gripped the desk to stay upright. They didn't just destroy Jenna, they killed her grandmother with the same device. Kayla sat on the office floor for 20 minutes, unable to move. The files were spread around her like evidence at a crime scene, because that's exactly what this was. A crime, not a medical mystery, not a tragic diagnosis. A deliberate, calculated crime that had been hidden for a decade. She forced herself to think through the timeline. After the malpractice scandal nearly destroyed Helena Medical Center, the board needed to prove their auditory research program was viable. They needed success stories, data, results that would justify continued funding and restore their reputation. But experimental auditory devices can't be tested on adults who can sue. They needed vulnerable subjects, infants whose parents would trust the hospital, babies who couldn't speak for themselves. Jenna was born at the exact moment the hospital was desperate. Her mother died during delivery, leaving Grayson emotionally shattered and dependent on the medical staff. He was the perfect target, a grieving father who owned shares in the facility, who'd sign anything if it meant protecting his newborn daughter. So they lied to him. They implanted a device designed to suppress auditory function. They told him his daughter was born deaf. And for 10 years, they monitored her through follow-up appointments disguised as routine checkups, through specialists across 4 states who were paid to confirm the original diagnosis, through a system so tightly controlled that no one ever questioned it. Kayla's grandmother was collateral damage, an elderly patient who agreed to experimental treatment, not knowing she was part of the same program. When the device killed her, the hospital buried the evidence. When Kayla's family tried to sue, powerful lawyers made the case disappear. And Grayson never knew. He spent millions trying to cure his daughter, never realizing the people he trusted most were the ones who'd destroyed her. Kayla stood slowly, her legs shaking. She had a choice now. She could walk away, burn the files, pretend she never saw them, keep her job, protect herself. Or she could tell Grayson the truth and risk everything, her freedom, her future, maybe even her life. Because the people who orchestrated this conspiracy were still out there, still powerful, still protected. And they wouldn't let this secret surface without a fight. Kayla waited until morning. She couldn't confront Grayson in the middle of the night, not with this. He needed to see her face, hear her voice, understand she wasn't making this up. She found him in the main ranch house kitchen, pouring coffee with hands that still trembled from the day before. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Mr. Daxton," Kayla said quietly, "I need to examine Jenna's ear." His head snapped up. "What?" "Behind her ear, where she keeps touching. I need to look at it, closely." Grayson set the coffee down hard. "Absolutely not. You're a housekeeper, not a—" "I know what's inside her ear." Kayla's voice didn't waver. "And if I'm right, your daughter is in danger right now." The color drained from his face. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he called for Jenna. The girl appeared in the doorway, confused, her hand already drifting toward that familiar spot. Kayla knelt in front of her, holding a sterilized flashlight she'd prepared earlier. Grayson stood behind them, rigid, his breathing shallow. "Sweetheart," Kayla whispered, "I need to look behind your ear, just for a second. Can you hold very still?" Jenna nodded slowly. Kayla angled the light and leaned in. The skin behind Jenna's ear was slightly raised, discolored, and when Kayla pressed gently with her thumb, something beneath the surface moved. Not bone, not cartilage, something foreign. Her stomach turned. She'd seen this before in the autopsy photos from her grandmother's file. The same pale, mechanical shape, the same unnatural placement, the same micro-device doctor Halden had implanted in vulnerable patients. Kayla pulled back, her hands shaking. She met Grayson's eyes. "Your daughter wasn't born deaf," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone at Helena Medical Center implanted a device in her ear when she was 3 days old. It's still there. And if we don't remove it soon, it could kill her the same way it killed my grandmother." Grayson's legs buckled. He grabbed the counter to stay upright. That's impossible," the doctors said. "The doctors lied." Kayla's voice cracked. "And you paid them to do it." The truth Grayson had been running from for 10 years was buried inside his daughter's skull. Grayson wanted to call an ambulance, drive to Bozeman, get specialists. But Kayla stopped him cold. "If we go to a hospital, they'll ask questions. They'll contact Helena. And whoever put this inside your daughter will know we found it." She paused, letting that sink in. "By the time we get answers, Jenna could be dead." his face twisted with fear and rage. "So, what do you want me to do? Let you cut into my daughter's ear? I've done this before." Kayla's voice was steady, even though her hands weren't. "Not on a person, but I've seen the autopsy reports. I know where the device sits. I know what happens if it stays in too long." Grayson looked at Jenna. The girl stared back at him, confused, one hand pressed against her ear like always. He made his decision. "Do it." Kayla worked fast. She sterilized a pair of precision tweezers over the stove flame, cleaned the area behind Jenna's ear with rubbing alcohol, and positioned the girl under the brightest kitchen light. Grayson stood frozen across the table, his knuckles white against the chair back. "Jenna," Kayla whispered, "this is going to hurt, but I need you to stay very, very still. Can you do that?" The girl nodded, tears already forming. Kayla pressed the tweezers against the raised skin. The device shifted deeper, as if trying to burrow away from the light. She adjusted her angle, hands trembling, and pushed through the outer layer of tissue. Jenna's silent scream filled the kitchen. Grayson lurched forward. "Stop! Don't touch me!" Kayla's voice cut like steel. She kept her focus locked on the device. It was slick, pale, almost organic-looking, but with metallic edges that gleamed under the light. She gripped it carefully too hard and it could fragment, too soft and it would slip back inside. She pulled, slowly. The tissue resisted. Jenna's body shook. Blood trickled down her neck. And then finally the device came free. Kayla dropped it onto a white dish towel. It twitched once, then went still. Grayson stared at it, his breathing ragged. "What? What is that?" Kayla wiped the blood from Jenna's ear, her own hands shaking violently now. "That's what they did to your daughter." And it was still warm. Grayson couldn't take his eyes off the device. It sat on the white towel like something pulled from a nightmare, metallic, biological, wrong. He reached for it with shaking fingers. "Don't touch it," Kayla warned. "We need it as evidence." "Evidence of what?" His voice cracked. "What the hell did they put inside my daughter?" Kayla pulled the stolen files from her bag and spread them across the kitchen table. Medical reports, funding documents, surgical logs, and at the center of it all the signature that connected everything. Dr. R. Halden. "This device," Kayla said, pointing to the metallic object, "was part of an illegal auditory suppression trial. Helena Medical Center was facing bankruptcy after a malpractice scandal. They needed to prove their research program worked. They needed test subjects." Grayson's face went pale. "No, they wouldn't." "They did." Kayla's voice hardened. "They selected infants whose families couldn't fight back. Jenna was born the same week the hospital board approved emergency funding. Her mother had just died. You were vulnerable, desperate. You owned shares in the facility. You were the perfect target." She slid another document across the table, a funding approval form with Grayson's signature at the bottom. "You paid for the research program that destroyed your daughter's hearing." Grayson staggered backward, gripping the counter. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't." "I know you didn't." Kayla's voice softened slightly. "But there's more." She pulled out the final page, the one that had shattered her the night before. The post-surgical complication report. 3 infant patients listed, and 1 adult. Lorraine Amelia. "My grandmother," Kayla whispered, "died from the same device. 6 months after Jenna's surgery, they tested an upgraded version on elderly patients. They told her it would restore her hearing. Instead, it triggered neurological failure. She died 3 weeks later." Grayson's eyes widened in horror. "Kayla, I'm so sorry. I didn't." "You funded both surgeries." Her voice cracked. "The same program, the same hospital, the same doctor. If you haven't subscribed yet, you need to, because what happens next will destroy you." Kayla pointed to the device on the towel. "Dr. Holden didn't just implant these to suppress hearing. He embedded them to study auditory nerve degeneration over time. That's why Jenna kept touching her ear. The device was actively damaging tissue, collecting data, sending it back to the research team. Grayson's knees buckled. He collapsed into a chair, his face in his hands. "Your daughter wasn't just a victim," Kayla said quietly. "She was an experiment that lasted 10 years. And the people who did this were still out there watching, waiting, protected." For a long time, no one spoke. The kitchen felt smaller somehow, colder. The device sat between them like a confession neither of them wanted to touch. Grayson finally lifted his head. His eyes were red, hollow. "What do I do now?" Kayla didn't answer immediately. She looked at Jenna instead. The girl sat quietly at the table, one hand pressed against the bandage behind her ear. Her eyes moved between Kayla and her father, confused but calm. "You start," Kayla said softly, "by talking to your daughter." Grayson's face twisted. "She can't hear me. Maybe she can now." He stared at Kayla like she'd just suggested something impossible. But then he turned to Jenna, slowly, carefully. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Jenna." The girl's head turned, not toward movement, not toward a shadow, toward sound. Grayson's breath caught. He tried again, louder this time. "Jenna, can you hear me?" Her eyes locked onto his face, and then, trembling, hesitant, she nodded. Grayson broke. He crossed the kitchen in 2 steps and pulled his daughter into his arms, sobbing into her hair. Jenna didn't pull away. For the first time in 10 years, she clung to him, not out of fear, not out of obligation, because she finally heard him. Kayla stepped back, her own tears falling silently. This wasn't the ending she'd imagined when she took the job 3 months ago. She thought she'd just be cleaning floors and cooking meals. She never thought she'd uncover a conspiracy. She never thought she'd save a child's life. But maybe that's how miracles work. They don't announce themselves. They don't ask permission. They just show up in the hands of people willing to act when everyone else looks away. Grayson pulled back, gripping Jenna's shoulders, his voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I should have protected you. I should have." Kayla placed a hand on his arm. "You protect her now. You expose Helena. You make sure no one else suffers what she did." He nodded, his jaw tight with something new. Not grief, not guilt. Resolve. "They won't get away with this," he said quietly. "I'll burn that hospital to the ground if I have to." Kayla believed him, because sometimes the people who've been broken the hardest are the ones who fight the fiercest when they finally see the truth. And the truth, after 10 years of silence, had finally found its voice.